Yufi talked about stress management. So I think it's clear to everyone that well-being isn't just one thing. It's not just I do one thing and I have well-being. And there's aspects like physical health, right? So we know that it's important to be in good shape, to keep your body healthy. There's nutrition. It's important to eat the good foods that support your body's health and hopefully don't give your body a lot of the things that it doesn't really need, which we have in modern foods. And of course, well-being is also about the mental health, the emotional health, what we talked about earlier today and what Annabelle also just mentioned, anxiety and depression. Well-being is therefore multifaceted, and you need all of these things. You can't say one is more important than the other. And yet today, I want to make the argument here that there actually is one piece to the well-being puzzle that is more important than all the others. Because without it, nothing that you do can really come to fruition, can really work as well as it should and support your well-being. And that one piece is sleep. Without adequate sleep, it's impossible to be and feel and perform at your best. And there's a couple of examples for that. For example, there was a study conducted in the year 2000 that showed that after being awake for 17 to 18 hours, your cognitive performance is equally impaired as if you had a blood alcohol level of 0.05, which is the legal limit for driving in most Western countries. Right, so think about that. If you've been awake for 18 hours, your reaction time, response speed, all these things are as impaired as if you were drunk. Not good. Secondly, there was a study that found people who sleep 6 hours or less per night are several times more likely to consume more calories, more processed foods, more sugar the next day than people who sleep 8 hours. And this has to do with several hormones, ghrelin, leptin, and others. But I think what it highlights is that if you are struggling to control your cravings for sugar, for processed foods, it isn't necessarily a matter of your willpower. Maybe you just need more sleep. And lastly, a study conducted just last year found that there are it linked several mood disorders as well as markers of cardiovascular health to a lack of a regularity in sleep. So not necessarily the duration, but just if you have an irregular sleep routine, that can also negatively impact your well-being. So whether you knew these things or not, you probably knew that sleep is important, right? Most people do know that. And yet, on the other hand, most people don't get enough sleep. Why is that? So as adults, we need about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, and adolescents and children should get even more. And most of us don't reach that magic number. Why is that? Several problems. The first one is we typically overestimate how much we're actually sleeping. When you turn off the lights at 10 p.m. and your alarm comes on at 6 a.m. the next day, what that means is you've been in bed for 8 hours. It doesn't mean you've actually slept for 8 hours. And sleep scientists call the difference between the time that you've tried to sleep, these 8 hours from 10 to 6, compared to the time that you're actually in a state of sleep, the difference is called sleep efficiency. And normal healthy adults, not those with sleep disorders, normal healthy adults have been found to have a sleep efficiency of about 85 to 95%. So that means if you're going for those 8 hours, 10 to 6, at best you'll have 7, maybe 7.5 hours of sleep. And now if you're only going for 7 hours from the onset, I think you can do the math on that. The second problem is sleep quality. Even if you're sleeping enough, which as I just said, you probably aren't, sleep quality is also often impacted by the way we live our modern lives. By nature, our circadian rhythm, our inner body clock, should be regulated by the presence of light specifically sunlight. But as we all know, we tend to, in our modern lives, we tend to override nature's signals by the exposure to artificial light, to screens from devices, late into the evening, even in the middle of the night sometimes, and that causes your circadian rhythm, your inner clock, to get out of sync with your natural rhythm, and that obviously impacts the quality. Secondly, as we go through the day, there's a molecule called adenosine, and it builds up in your body as the day goes on, and it causes a phenomenon that we call sleep pressure. So as more adenosine builds up and attaches itself to certain cells in your body, the sleep pressure builds up. But there's a substance that you can take, and that we all take, which blocks these receptor cells, and therefore the adenosine cannot attach itself, and the sleep pressure doesn't build up. And I'm sure you've guessed it, this substance is caffeine. So if you find yourself working late into the night, looking or being exposed to the lights from the screen, maybe you're having a coffee with that just to be able to get through it. Maybe now you know why the sleep that follows is probably not of the quality that you had hoped, and maybe also not of the duration that you needed. And lastly, or perhaps the more far-reaching problem of these two problems, is that we often don't think we have a problem. We think it is other people that don't have an optimal sleep routine, that don't get enough sleep. It's usually not us. And why is that? Because as humans, we are very, very adaptable, and probably you know this from yourself. If you get one night of bad sleep, likely the next day you're feeling tired, you're feeling lethargic, and you don't feel at your best. If you go several days like that, you suddenly become accustomed to this state of feeling, of being, and you might think that you're fine. But as I just explained, sleep is the foundational piece upon which the well-being is built, and it's non-negotiable. I guarantee you're not fine if you're sleeping too little. So I want to leave you with this thought, and perhaps starting from tonight, if you are deciding between watching another show on Netflix or turning the lights off, maybe you'll remember what I talked about today, and you maybe make a different choice. Thank you.